Welcome to Sleepy Stories. In this episode, we will take a clear and steady look at the human brain, how it works, how it connects, and how it silently shapes our world. The goal is to help you learn while you rest. If you do not fall asleep right away, that is completely fine. In the time you are awake, you will learn interesting scientific facts before you fall asleep. Simply listen, let your breathing slow, and allow the information to settle at its own pace. If you enjoy this journey, consider liking or subscribing. It supports the channel and helps us bring you more stories like this. Beneath the protective shell of your skull lies a structure that weighs about 1.5 kilograms. It feels soft, almost like firm tofu, and is bathed in clear fluid that cushions every movement. Despite its size, the brain uses more energy than any other organ in the body, around 20% of all the oxygen and glucose you take in. Its surface appears wrinkled, a folded terrain of grooves and ridges called gyri and sulci. These folds aren't random. They allow more brain surface area to fit into the confined space of the skull, packing billions of neurons into a compact, efficient space. The brain contains about 86 billion neurons. Each neuron connects to thousands of others, creating an estimated 100 trillion connections, known as synapses. These connections form vast networks that transmit signals using tiny electrical impulses and bursts of chemicals. With these, the brain manages everything from your heartbeat to your most cherished memories. Thought, emotion, vision, language, and movement all emerge from these silent circuits. The cerebral cortex, the brain's outer layer, handles complex thinking and decision-making. It is divided into 4 main lobes: the frontal lobe for planning and control, the parietal lobe for spatial awareness and touch, the temporal lobe for sound and language, and the occipital lobe for vision. Beneath this surface lies the limbic system, a cluster of structures involved in emotion, memory, and motivation. Deeper still, the brainstem regulates essential functions like breathing and heart rate, operating beneath awareness to keep you alive. But the brain is not just a machine. It is a biological organ that gives rise to something far more elusive: consciousness. This single structure holds your personality, your preferences, your history. When you remember a melody, solve a problem, or feel moved by a story, it is because a precise pattern of neurons is firing in harmony. No other structure in the known universe does this. The brain not only lets you experience the world, it also lets you reflect on those experiences, adding depth and meaning that go beyond sensory input. What makes the brain even more remarkable is that it is not static. It changes continuously. Each new experience, thought, or skill alters the connections between neurons, a phenomenon known as neuroplasticity. Your brain is literally shaped by how you use it. Learning something new doesn't just leave a mark, it rewires circuits. Habits, repetition, and practice can strengthen some pathways, while others fade if unused. Consider the mystery of self-awareness. The brain is the only known system in nature capable of studying itself. This recursive ability to observe one's own thoughts, emotions, and motives is central to human consciousness. It allows us to ask questions like, "Who am I? And why did I do that?" These reflections arise not from magic, but from the interaction of billions of cells exchanging chemical signals in structured patterns. As we move through this story, we'll look at how the brain developed over evolutionary time, how it processes information, how it feels, remembers, and dreams. We'll explore its structure and chemistry, its fragility and adaptability. We'll learn how it builds language, supports creativity, regulates emotion, and helps us navigate the world with surprising grace. This will not be a journey of poetic metaphors or imaginary landscapes. Instead, it will be a steady unfolding of biological reality, more awe-inspiring in its precision than fantasy could ever be. The brain is a quiet companion, shaping every moment of your waking and sleeping life. It is the source of thought and the organ of feeling. It does not glow or hum. It works in silence, moment by moment, shaping the person you are becoming. If you find yourself growing drowsy as this story continues, that is completely fine. The brain knows how to keep listening even as sleep begins. And if not, your waking mind will still gather new understanding, gently, clearly, and without rush. Let us begin at the very beginning, how the brain came to be, shaped by millions of years of evolution. The human brain did not appear all at once. It is the result of hundreds of millions of years of gradual change, each step shaped by survival, adaptation, and the deep currents of evolution. To understand its present complexity, we must look back to its origins in the ancient seas, where the first nervous systems emerged. The earliest animals had no brains, only loose networks of nerve cells. Jellyfish, for instance, still use such simple systems today, sensing light, movement, and danger without a centralized organ. These early neurons allowed for basic reflexes: contract, swim, avoid. Over time, as life grew more mobile and complex, clusters of neurons began to form at the front of the body. These clusters became the precursors to brains, centers for processing information, coordinating movement, and making quick decisions. In flatworms, we see the beginnings of a central nervous system. They have two nerve cords running down their bodies and a small, rudimentary brain at the front, a basic structure that already enables simple learning and memory. As animals grew more complex, so did their nervous systems. Insects developed compact but efficient brains capable of navigation, problem-solving, and social behavior. The humble honeybee, for example, can communicate the location of flowers to its hive through a symbolic dance, a sophisticated act powered by just under 1 million neurons. The real leap came with vertebrates, animals with backbones. Fish developed larger brains to handle complex movement, balance, and environmental awareness. Amphibians added the ability to process sounds and limb coordination. Reptiles expanded further, with improved memory and spatial reasoning, but it was the mammals who took brain development to extraordinary new levels. In mammals, the neocortex appeared, a layered, sheet-like structure responsible for perception, decision-making, and voluntary movement. With it came increased behavioral flexibility. Mammals could learn from experience, adapt to new situations, and form intricate social bonds. Their brains were no longer limited to instinct. They could plan, hesitate, and remember. Primates, our own evolutionary branch, developed even more refined brain structures. Vision became the dominant sense, and the prefrontal cortex expanded, allowing for abstract thought, delayed gratification, and problem-solving. These capabilities helped early humans survive in unpredictable environments, cooperate in groups, and develop tools, language, and culture. The human brain is especially large relative to body size. This expansion did not come easily. The growing brain required more energy, leading to dietary changes, social cooperation, and the use of fire to extract more calories from food. Over time, these adaptations fed back into brain growth, creating a cycle of development that made us who we are. Yet, for all its refinement, the human brain still contains traces of its past. The brainstem, which controls breathing and heart rate, is ancient and shared with fish. The limbic system, where emotions and basic drives live, reflects our mammalian heritage. And even the most advanced regions, like the prefrontal cortex, are built on older layers beneath them. Evolution did not start from scratch. It built upon what already worked, adding complexity rather than replacing. This layered structure is part of what makes the brain both powerful and fragile. Our instincts and emotions can conflict with reason, habits can override logic, We are creatures of both past and present, carrying the memory of evolution in our very structure. We have this reflection that every thought, every word, every act of kindness or calculation traces back to a long chain of life that began with a cluster of neurons in ancient seas. Your brain is not just yours, it is the latest version of a design that has been unfolding for 500 million years. Let us now look inside this organ that evolution built, at its intricate physical structure, and how each part contributes to the mind it creates. At first glance, the human brain appears chaotic, a mass of folds and creases, soft and grey, unlike anything else in the body. But beneath that wrinkled surface lies remarkable organization. Every curve and layer, every channel and region serves a purpose. The design of the brain reflects the complexity of human life, how we move, think, feel, and perceive. The largest and most visible part of the brain is the cerebrum, which is divided into two symmetrical halves called hemispheres. These two halves communicate through a dense bridge of fibers known as the corpus callosum, allowing constant exchange of information. Although the hemispheres look alike, they tend to specialize in different types of processing. In most people, the left hemisphere plays a stronger role in language and logic, while the right is more engaged with spatial awareness and pattern recognition. The outer layer of the cerebrum is called the cerebral cortex. It is just a few millimeters thick but contains billions of neurons. Its surface is deeply folded, increasing surface area to accommodate more connections without needing a larger skull. The cortex is divided into four main regions, known as lobes, each with specific responsibilities. The frontal lobe, located at the front of the brain just behind the forehead, is responsible for planning, decision-making, voluntary movement, and impulse control. Behind it lies the parietal lobe, which processes sensations like touch, temperature, and body position. On the sides of the brain, near the ears, are the temporal lobes. These handle sound, language, and aspects of memory. At the very back of the head sits the occipital lobe, which is devoted almost entirely to processing visual input. Within these lobes are smaller regions that carry out even more specific tasks. For example, the primary motor cortex, which runs along a strip of the frontal lobe, sends commands to muscles to initiate voluntary movement. Just behind it, in the parietal lobe, is the somatosensory cortex, which receives signals from the skin and joints. These neighboring regions form a kind of internal dialogue, constantly exchanging information to guide and refine your actions. Beneath the surface of the cortex lie several deeper structures. The limbic system, located near the center of the brain, includes the amygdala, which responds to emotional stimuli, the hippocampus, which is crucial for forming and storing memories, and the hypothalamus, which regulates hunger, thirst, temperature, and hormonal rhythms. These components work together to shape your emotional experiences and connect them with memory and motivation. Deeper still is the brainstem, the most ancient part of the brain. It connects the brain to the spinal cord and oversees the automatic functions that sustain life, such as breathing, heart rate, and digestion. These processes continue whether you are awake, asleep, or unconscious, requiring no effort or awareness on your part. Nestled behind the brainstem is the cerebellum. Though smaller than the cerebrum, it is essential for balance, coordination, and fine motor control. While it does not initiate movement, it refines and adjusts it, helping you move smoothly and precisely. Surrounding and protecting the brain is a system of support. It is suspended in cerebrospinal fluid, which cushions it from physical shocks and helps remove metabolic waste. 3 layers of soft tissue, known as the meninges, wrap around the brain like protective fabric. Outside all of this is the hard shell of the skull, shielding this delicate organ from external harm. Although the brain has specialized areas, it does not operate in isolation. Each part relies on communication with others, forming a dynamic network that adapts moment to moment. If one area is damaged, others may adapt to take over its functions, a testament to the brain's resilience and plasticity. Every time you speak, remember, imagine, or reach for a glass, you are drawing on this intricate and interconnected system. The brain is not a container for thought. It is thought, alive, structured, and always changing. Now that we've explored the physical form, we will turn next to the cells that make this extraordinary organ work. Beneath the folds of the brain, down to its finest level, lies a microscopic world of extraordinary activity. The brain is not a single mass of tissue. It is made up of billions of individual cells. The most important of these are neurons, specialized for one task: communication. Neurons are the building blocks of thought, movement, sensation, and memory. Each one is a tiny living wire, capable of sending signals across vast neural networks that allow your body and mind to function as one. A typical neuron has three main parts. At the center is the cell body, which contains the nucleus and manages the cell's internal processes. Extending from the cell body are short branching fibers called dendrites, which receive signals from other neurons. On the opposite side is a long projection known as the axon. This is the neuron's main output line, carrying electrical impulses over distances that can range from a fraction of a millimeter to more than a meter in length. When a neuron receives a strong enough signal from its neighbors, it generates an electrical impulse that travels down the axon like a wave. This wave is called an action potential. The axon is often wrapped in a fatty layer called myelin, which speeds up signal transmission. In well-insulated neurons, signals can travel at over 100 meters per second. This is how you can react to a sharp object, catch a falling glass, or recall a memory in an instant. At the end of the axon, the impulse reaches a tiny gap called a synapse. This gap separates the sending neuron from the receiving one. Rather than the signal jumping as electricity, it is converted into a chemical message. Small packets of chemicals, called neurotransmitters, are released into the synaptic gap and float across to receptors on the next neuron. If enough neurotransmitters bind to these receptors, the receiving neuron will fire its own electrical impulse, and the process continues. This is how signals move through the brain, neither fully electrical nor fully chemical, but a combination of both. Each neuron can form thousands of synapses, allowing it to connect with many others. The result is a vast web of communication, with trillions of signals passing through at any given moment. These signals are not random. They follow organized pathways that process sensory input, guide movement, shape memory, and form the contents of thought itself. Neurons do not work alone. They are supported by a class of cells known as glial cells. For many years, glial cells were thought to be passive scaffolding, simply holding neurons in place. But we now know they are essential for brain health. They supply nutrients, remove waste, maintain the chemical balance around neurons, and even play a role in modulating signal transmission. Some types of glial cells help form the blood-brain barrier, a protective filter that allows nutrients in but keeps harmful substances out. One of the brain's most fascinating properties is that it changes in response to experience. When you learn a new skill, remember a name, or form a habit, the strength of certain synaptic connections is altered. Connections that are used frequently become stronger and more efficient. Others that are unused may weaken or disappear. This adaptability, called synaptic plasticity, is the foundation of learning and memory. It allows the brain to rewire itself in response to new challenges or injuries. Patterns of neural activity give rise to everything we perceive and understand. When you hear a familiar voice, It is a pattern of firing neurons that recognizes the sound. When you imagine a future event, neurons create a simulation based on past experience. Every sensation, decision, and emotion begins as a chain reaction, one neuron triggering another and another, across a web that stretches through every part of your brain. The sheer scale of this system is hard to grasp, but despite the complexity, the rules are simple. Neurons fire, signals travel, patterns form, and connections strengthen with use. In this way, a living, thinking, feeling mind emerges, not from magic, but from structure, timing, and endless microscopic communication. Next, we will explore the messengers that travel across these synapses, the chemical signals that shape mood, motion, focus, and behavior. Every thought, every movement, every feeling is made possible by communication between neurons. But neurons don't talk in words. Their language is chemical, carried across tiny gaps by molecules known as neurotransmitters. These are the brain's messengers, small, fast, and highly specific. They allow neurons to signal one another, passing instructions, questions, and responses through the dense networks that shape your mental life. When an electrical impulse travels down a neuron's axon and reaches the end, it triggers the release of neurotransmitters stored in tiny sacs. These molecules drift across the synaptic gap and bind to receptors on the surface of the next neuron. Depending on the type of neurotransmitter and the receptor it attaches to, the effect may be excitatory, encouraging the next neuron to fire, or inhibitory, telling it to hold back. This balance of activation and restraint keeps the brain stable, responsive, and adaptable. One of the most well-known neurotransmitters is dopamine. It is often associated with reward, motivation, and learning. When you experience something pleasurable or achieve a goal, dopamine levels rise, reinforcing the behavior that led to the outcome. But dopamine is not just about feeling good. It also helps control movement and is essential for goal-directed behavior. In conditions like Parkinson's disease, where dopamine-producing cells degenerate, movement becomes slow and difficult. Serotonin is another important messenger. It plays a central role in mood regulation, appetite, sleep cycles, and emotional balance. Low levels of serotonin are often linked to depression and anxiety, and many antidepressant medications work by increasing its availability in the brain. Yet serotonin's effects are broad and not limited to mood alone. It influences how you interpret social signals, how well you sleep, and even how you respond to pain. Glutamate is the brain's primary excitatory neurotransmitter. It is involved in learning, memory formation, and overall neural activity. Without glutamate, neurons would fall silent. It opens the door to new connections, helping the brain respond to novelty and repetition. However, too much glutamate can be harmful. In certain brain injuries or diseases, excessive glutamate release can lead to overstimulation and cell damage. To counterbalance glutamate, the brain uses GABA, short for gamma-aminobutyric acid. GABA is the main inhibitory neurotransmitter. It calms neural activity, preventing overstimulation and promoting focus, emotional control, and rest. Medications that reduce anxiety often work by enhancing GABA's calming effects, helping to quiet an overactive mind. Acetylcholine plays a different role. It supports attention, memory, and muscle activation. It helps you focus on a conversation, coordinate movement, and store information for later. Acetylcholine is especially important in the hippocampus and other memory-related areas. In Alzheimer's disease, one of the first changes is a decline in acetylcholine activity, which contributes to memory loss. Norepinephrine, closely related to adrenaline, prepares the brain and body for action. It sharpens attention, increases alertness, and helps you respond to challenges. Whether it's navigating a difficult task or reacting to a sudden sound, norepinephrine primes the brain for fast, efficient decision-making. All of these neurotransmitters work together in delicate balance. No single chemical controls emotion or thought entirely. The brain uses combinations of signals to shape complex mental states. A feeling of joy, for example, might involve dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin all at once, each influencing a different part of the experience. Likewise, focus requires both excitation and inhibition, stimulation and restraint. It's important to note that neurotransmitters don't act in isolation. Their effects depend on the receptors they bind to, the region of the brain involved, and the existing state of the neural network. The same molecule can have different effects depending on context. This is why medications that alter brain chemistry often have a range of effects, some intended, some not. The brain's chemical language is fast, flexible, and deeply precise. Every second, billions of neurotransmitter exchanges are happening silently, directing thought, shaping mood, and guiding action. These molecules do not carry meaning in the way words do, but they carry impact, fine-tuning every layer of experience from moment to moment. Next, we will shift from chemistry to rhythm and rest, exploring how the brain behaves during sleep and how that state supports its most essential functions. Sleep is often misunderstood. It is not the absence of wakefulness, nor simply a pause in daily activity. It is an essential, active state in which the brain performs some of its most critical work. Though your muscles rest and your senses fade, the brain does not go quiet. In sleep, it restores, reorganizes, and protects itself, preparing you for the challenges of the next waking day. The sleep cycle is not uniform. It moves in repeating stages throughout the night, each with distinct effects on brain activity. Light sleep helps transition into deeper stages. Deep sleep, also known as slow-wave sleep, is where the brain enters a state of low-frequency, high-amplitude electrical patterns. During this stage, neurons fire in synchronized waves, and the body achieves its most profound rest. Later in the cycle comes rapid eye movement, or REM sleep. In this phase, brain activity increases again, resembling the pattern of wakefulness, and this is when most dreaming occurs. Sleep is central to memory consolidation. When you learn something new during the day, the information is initially stored in a temporary buffer, often in the hippocampus. During sleep, especially in the deeper stages, these memories are replayed and gradually transferred to the cortex for long-term storage. This process strengthens the connections between neurons, making the memory more stable and accessible. Learning without sleep is like saving a file without clicking save. The data fades more easily, even if it seemed clear at the time. Beyond memory, sleep also plays a vital role in emotional regulation. During REM sleep, the brain processes emotionally charged experiences and helps reduce the intensity of negative emotions. Studies have shown that people who are sleep-deprived respond more strongly to emotional stress, with increased activity in the amygdala, the part of the brain that signals fear and threat. At the same time, the prefrontal cortex, which helps regulate those responses, becomes less active. Without enough sleep, emotions can become more reactive, and the ability to think clearly can erode. Another crucial function of sleep is the clearing of metabolic waste. Throughout the day, the brain accumulates byproducts from normal neural activity. One such substance, beta amyloid, is associated with Alzheimer's disease when it builds up in excess. During deep sleep, the brain's cleaning system, called the glymphatic system, increases its activity, flushing waste products through channels formed by glial cells. This function is difficult to replicate while awake, making sleep one of the brain's most powerful tools for self-maintenance. The effects of sleep, or its absence, are felt quickly. A single night of poor sleep can affect attention, reaction time, memory formation, and emotional control. Prolonged sleep deprivation impairs decision-making and weakens immune responses. Over time, chronic sleep deficits have been linked to increased risks of depression, anxiety, cardiovascular disease, and neurodegenerative conditions. The cost of not sleeping is measured in more than just fatigue. And yet, the body is remarkably good at guiding you toward what you need. The pressure to sleep increases the longer you are awake, driven by rising levels of a molecule called adenosine. At the same time, the brain tracks the time of day through the circadian rhythm, an internal clock shaped by light, temperature, and routine. Together, these systems guide the natural cycles of sleep and wake, shaping when you feel alert and when you begin to drift. As we learn more about the sleeping brain, it becomes increasingly clear that this state is not passive, it is one of profound activity and precision. Sleep is not wasted time. It is a state of repair, organization, and subtle recalibration. As one recent study put it, during deep sleep, the brain quietly strengthens memories and clears away waste, preparing the mind for a new day. This line captures the essence of what happens when you lie down, close your eyes, and allow the body and mind to rest. In the next part of our journey, we will explore how the brain itself develops, from the first sparks of activity in the womb to the intricate architecture of the adult mind. The journey of the brain begins long before birth. Within just 3 weeks of conception, a thin strip of cells on the embryo's back folds into a structure called the neural tube. This simple tube will become the brain and spinal cord. From this early moment, the brain develops at an astonishing pace, laying down the foundation for every thought, movement, and experience yet to come. In the early fetal stages, neurons are generated at a rate of hundreds of thousands per minute. These cells migrate across the growing brain, settling into regions where they begin forming the basic layout of future circuits. Even before birth, neurons begin sending electrical signals, testing connections, and forming the earliest patterns of activity. By the time a baby is born, the brain already contains the vast majority of the neurons it will ever have, billions of them, ready to connect. But birth is just the beginning. The infant brain is alive with potential, but much of its wiring is unfinished. In the first few years of life, synapses, the connections between neurons, form at a tremendous rate. In fact, during early childhood, the brain produces far more synapses than it will ultimately keep. This overproduction gives the brain flexibility, allowing it to adapt to whatever environment it encounters. Experience begins shaping the brain almost immediately. Each sound, sight, smell, and touch strengthens some connections and weakens others. Neural circuits that are used frequently become more efficient, while those that are not used are eventually pruned away. This process, known as synaptic pruning, helps the brain become more specialized and efficient over time. It is why early experiences, positive or negative, can have long-lasting effects on emotional, cognitive, and social development. As the child grows, different brain regions mature at different rates. Sensory areas, such as vision and hearing, develop early, allowing babies to respond to the world around them. Language circuits are next, reaching a critical period in the first few years. During this time, children can learn multiple languages effortlessly, simply by being exposed to them. If that window closes without sufficient exposure, language learning becomes more difficult later in life. Adolescence brings another wave of transformation. The brain undergoes a second major period of pruning, particularly in the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for planning, impulse control, and reasoning. This process continues well into the mid-20s. During adolescence, Emotional circuits such as the amygdala may mature faster than the regions responsible for self-regulation, which helps explain the intensity and impulsiveness often seen in teenage behavior. The adolescent brain is not broken, it is learning rapidly, remodeling itself for adulthood. Adulthood marks a period of relative stability. The brain remains capable of learning and adapting, but the pace of change slows. Neuroplasticity continues, allowing for skill acquisition, habit formation, and even recovery from injury. Throughout life, the brain is shaped by relationships, challenges, education, and environment. Every new skill, every memory, every change in routine leaves a trace, subtle, perhaps, but real. Importantly, brain development is not a simple upward climb. It is a dynamic process of growth, refinement, and adaptation. Genes provide the blueprint, but experience sculpts the outcome. No two brains are exactly alike. Even among identical twins, differences in attention, temperament, and problem-solving arise from subtle variations in neural pathways shaped by life. From the womb to adulthood, the brain's development is a story of preparation. It is building the tools needed to interpret the world, respond to it, and reflect upon it. It is preparing not just to survive, but to imagine, to create, and to connect. The next stage of our story will show just how flexible this organ is, how, even after development is complete, the brain remains capable of change. The brain is often imagined as something fixed, a finished product once development ends, but this is far from the truth. The adult brain is not a static organ. It is dynamic, responsive, and constantly adjusting. Its ability to change, rewire, and adapt is known as neuroplasticity, a property that makes the brain one of the most resilient systems in biology. Neuroplasticity refers to the brain's capacity to reorganize its structure and function in response to experience, learning, or injury. From early development through adulthood and even into old age, the brain remains open to modification. It forms new connections, strengthens existing ones, and lets go of those no longer needed. This process occurs at the level of synapses, those tiny junctions where neurons exchange signals, and it can also involve entire brain regions reassigning their functions. One of the clearest examples of plasticity is learning a new skill. When you practice playing the piano, studying a language, or improving a physical task like balance, certain patterns of neuronal firing become more frequent. Over time, these patterns are reinforced. The brain responds by strengthening those pathways, insulating them, and making the transmission of signals faster and more reliable. The result is improved performance, not because the muscles have changed, but because the brain's commands have become more refined. Plasticity is also essential for recovery. After a brain injury, such as a stroke, neurons in the damaged area may die or become inactive. In some cases, surrounding neurons take over the lost function. New connections can form, and existing circuits can adjust to route signals around the damage. Rehabilitation often taps into this capacity, using repetition and focused effort to guide the brain's reshaping process. While recovery is not always complete, the brain's willingness to adapt often exceeds expectations. Even ordinary daily experiences leave traces. Each conversation, every bit of feedback, each new challenge subtly adjusts the brain's wiring. The phrase, "what fires together, wires together," captures the essence of how repeated activity reinforces connections. Habits, whether helpful or harmful, are physical realities in the brain, shaped by consistent patterns of thought and behavior. But neuroplasticity is not unlimited. While children's brains are especially adaptable, adult brains are more selective in what they rewire. Changes come more slowly and require more repetition and effort. Motivation, attention, and emotional relevance all affect how readily the brain changes. In short, the brain rewires best when the new information matters, when it feels important, engaging, or rewarding. The brain is also capable of structural plasticity, not just at the synaptic level. Studies using brain imaging have shown that the volume of certain regions can increase or decrease depending on use. For instance, the hippocampus, the area involved in navigation and memory, has been shown to grow in individuals who engage in regular spatial training, such as taxi drivers who memorize complex city maps. Similarly, regular mindfulness or meditation practice can increase thickness in areas involved in attention and emotional regulation. Plasticity can be a source of strength, but it also helps explain vulnerability. Stress, trauma, and repeated negative experiences can alter neural pathways in ways that reinforce fear, anxiety, or pessimism. These patterns, once established, can be difficult to undo. However, because plasticity works in both directions, they are not permanent. With intentional effort and supportive environments, even deeply rooted habits of thought can be reshaped. What makes the brain remarkable is that it is both stable and flexible. It maintains a sense of identity and continuity, yet it allows for change, growth, and renewal. This capacity is at the heart of adaptation, learning, and healing. Your experiences become part of your biology, not just stored as memories, but etched into the circuitry that defines how you interpret the world. As we move forward, we'll explore how the brain uses this adaptable structure to interpret reality through the senses, turning waves, vibrations, and particles into sights, sounds, tastes, and touch. The world around you is full of signals, light bouncing off objects, sound waves moving through air, chemical particles drifting in space, vibrations, pressure, warmth, cold. Your brain does not interact with the world directly. Instead, it relies on your senses to gather information, translate it, and deliver it inward for interpretation. This process involves two steps: sensation, the raw detection of stimuli by sensory organs, and perception, the brain's interpretation of those signals to form a coherent experience. Sensory receptors are specialized to detect specific forms of energy. In the eyes, photoreceptors respond to light. In the ears, tiny hair cells respond to the mechanical movement caused by sound waves. The skin contains sensors that detect pressure, temperature, and pain. In the nose and on the tongue, chemoreceptors respond to airborne or dissolved molecules, giving rise to smell and taste. Once a stimulus is detected, it is converted into electrical signals, action potentials, that travel along sensory nerves to the brain. These signals do not carry inherent meaning. The brain must analyze their frequency, timing, intensity, and location to determine what is being sensed. The thalamus, located deep within the brain, acts as a relay station. Nearly all sensory information passes through the thalamus before being sent to specialized regions of the cerebral cortex for further processing. Each sense has its own cortical destination. Visual information is processed in the occipital lobe. Sound is analyzed in the temporal lobe. Touch is interpreted in the parietal lobe. The primary sensory cortices extract simple features, edges, tones, textures, while association areas integrate these features into complete perceptions. For example, you don't just see lines and shapes, you recognize a face. You don't just hear tones, you understand a voice. Perception is not a passive mirror. It is an active, interpretive process. The brain fills in gaps, corrects distortions, and applies memory and expectation to shape what you experience. This is why optical illusions can be so powerful. They reveal how much the brain guesses and assumes in its quest for understanding. What you perceive often depends as much on your prior experience as on the raw input from your senses. Attention plays a crucial role. With limited capacity, the brain cannot process all sensory input equally. It must decide what to focus on and what to ignore. This selective process can cause you to miss obvious stimuli, a phenomenon known as inattentional blindness. While walking down a busy street, you might not notice a familiar face because your mind is preoccupied. The brain chooses efficiency over completeness, narrowing focus to what it deems relevant in the moment. Emotion and perception are also deeply linked. A neutral face can appear threatening if you are anxious. A sound may seem louder if it startles you. The limbic system, which governs emotion, interacts with sensory systems to color perception with mood and meaning. In this way, perception is never purely physical. It is shaped by feelings, memories, expectations, and goals. Even the timing of signals matters. The brain integrates sensory information that arrives within a brief window of time, milliseconds apart, to create a unified perception. When you watch someone speak, your brain aligns the movement of their lips with the sound of their voice. If these signals are out of sync, it creates confusion or distortion. This ability to synchronize inputs allows us to experience the world as continuous and smooth, even when sensory data arrives in fragments. All of this happens without conscious effort. You do not have to think about how your brain turns vibrations into music or light into landscapes. Perception simply arises, shaped by circuits tuned over a lifetime of experience. The world you think you see is not raw reality. It is a constructed model, constantly updated by your brain to guide you safely and efficiently through life. Next, we will zoom in on the most dominant human sense, vision, and examine how the brain transforms patterns of light into a rich, detailed visual world. Vision is the dominant sense for most people. It provides a constant stream of information about the world, where things are, how they move, and what they mean. But seeing is not something the eyes do alone. It is a process that begins with light and ends with meaning. Between those 2 points lies an extraordinary journey through the brain. Light enters the eye through the transparent outer layer called the cornea, then passes through the pupil, whose size adjusts depending on brightness. Behind the pupil, the lens focuses the incoming light onto the retina, a thin layer of tissue at the back of the eye. The retina contains specialized photoreceptor cells, rods and cones, that convert light into electrical signals. Rods are sensitive to dim light and help with night vision, while cones detect color and fine detail in brighter light. These signals do not travel directly to the brain. First, they pass through a layer of intermediate cells in the retina that begin organizing the information, enhancing edges, adjusting for contrast, and highlighting movement. The processed signals are then collected by the ganglion cells, whose long fibers come together to form the optic nerve. This nerve exits the eye and carries visual information toward the brain. Along the way, the optic nerves from each eye meet at a structure called the optic chiasm, where some of the fibers cross to the opposite side. This arrangement ensures that visual information from the right side of the visual field is processed by the left hemisphere of the brain, and vice versa. The signals continue to the lateral geniculate nucleus of the thalamus, which acts as a relay station, and from there are sent to the primary visual cortex at the back of the brain. The primary visual cortex, located in the occipital lobe, is where the brain begins to interpret the basic features of what you see: edges, motion, angles, orientation, and light intensity. But vision does not stop there. Information is passed along to multiple visual association areas, where the brain identifies shapes, detects patterns, recognizes faces, and tracks movement. One pathway specializes in recognizing what objects are, while another focuses on where they are in space and how they are moving. What's remarkable is how much of what you perceive is constructed by the brain. The eyes capture a two-dimensional image with a small central point of focus. The brain fills in the gaps, adjusts for lighting, corrects for eye movements, and interprets the scene in 3 dimensions. Depth perception, for instance, relies on cues like perspective, shadow, motion, and the slightly different views from each eye. Even color is not fixed. It is interpreted based on context and lighting conditions. Your brain also filters out a great deal of visual input. You are not consciously aware of the blood vessels in your eye or the blind spot where the optic nerve exits the retina. Yet those things are present in the raw data. The brain quietly edits them out to create a clean, stable image. It also stabilizes the visual field despite rapid eye movements, ensuring the world does not appear to bounce or blur with every glance. Familiarity shapes perception. When you walk into a room, your brain uses memory to fill in expected details. You recognize a chair as a chair not because of its exact shape, but because your brain compares its features to a library of past experiences. The same pattern recognition allows you to read quickly, spot a friend in a crowd, or notice when something is out of place. Seeing is more than light detection. It is a layered process of refinement, from raw energy to coherent meaning. It happens quickly, within fractions of a second, yet involves dozens of specialized brain regions working in parallel. You do not see with your eyes alone. You see with your brain, which interprets, predicts, and adjusts the visual world into something useful and recognizable. We now will explore the other senses: hearing, touch, taste, and smell, and how the brain weaves them into a rich, continuous experience. Throughout the day, your brain is exposed to an endless stream of information. Some of it is consciously noted: conversations, names, instructions, impressions. Much more is processed quietly, in the background, stored in fragments and patterns. But no matter how much you learn while awake, sleep is essential to make it last. It is during rest that the brain decides what to keep, what to strengthen, and how to integrate new knowledge into your existing understanding. Sleep plays a crucial role in memory consolidation, the process by which newly acquired information becomes stable and retrievable. When you study a new concept, learn a physical skill, or experience something emotionally significant, the memory is first stored in a temporary, flexible state. This early stage often involves the hippocampus, which acts like a fast but limited access notepad. During sleep, especially in non-REM stages, these memories are repeatedly reactivated and gradually transferred to the cortex, where they become more stable and long-lasting. The replay of memories during sleep is not random. The brain seems to prioritize information that is meaningful, emotionally charged, or newly acquired. In doing so, it strengthens useful patterns and prunes away less relevant ones. This silent sorting allows for sharper recall, deeper understanding, and improved problem-solving. Studies show that sleep after learning increases retention, even when no further practice occurs. Creativity also benefits from sleep. During REM sleep, brain activity becomes more chaotic and loosely structured. This state supports the mixing of unrelated ideas, often resulting in novel connections. People who sleep after encountering a complex problem are more likely to discover creative solutions compared to those who stay awake. The dreaming brain doesn't just replay the past, it experiments with it, reframing familiar information in new contexts. Emotional processing continues during sleep as well. Dreams, while often strange and fragmented, serve a deeper function. They allow the brain to revisit emotionally intense experiences and reduce their sting. This may be one reason people feel more emotionally stable after a full night's rest. The brain seems to use dreaming as a way to simulate, regulate, and diffuse feelings that might otherwise remain unresolved. Sleep deprivation, by contrast, has immediate and measurable effects on cognitive performance. Even one night of poor sleep can reduce attention span, impair working memory, and make complex reasoning more difficult. Without adequate sleep, the brain struggles to form new memories and has difficulty distinguishing between relevant and irrelevant details. Over time, chronic sleep loss can erode motivation, dull emotional sensitivity, and reduce the flexibility needed for creative thought. Importantly, sleep is not a uniform process. Different stages serve different functions. Slow-wave sleep is linked most strongly with factual memory and skill acquisition, while REM sleep seems to support creativity, emotional regulation, and associative thinking. Together, these stages form a cycle that repeats multiple times each night, each round deepening the brain's internal processing. The timing of sleep also matters. The brain follows a circadian rhythm, guided by light, hormones, and internal cycles. Learning late at night may be less effective than earlier in the day, especially if followed by limited sleep. But more critical than timing is consistency. Regular, adequate sleep gives the brain the conditions it needs to process the day, consolidate the meaningful, and clear away the noise. As research continues to uncover the layers of sleep's contribution to learning, one theme becomes increasingly clear. As we sleep, the brain replays, reorganizes, and sometimes reimagines what we've learned, turning fragments into insight. This quiet process makes sleep not a break from learning, but part of it, a closing act that shapes the mind long after the day is done. Next, we'll turn to the mechanisms behind movement, how the brain plans, directs, and refines even the simplest actions, moment by moment. Movement seems effortless. You reach for a glass, turn your head, or walk across a room without consciously planning each step. But behind these simple actions lies a complex orchestration of neural commands, muscle responses, and feedback loops. The brain not only initiates movement, it constantly monitors, adjusts, and refines it in real time. Voluntary movement begins in the motor cortex, a band of tissue stretching across the top of the brain from ear to ear. When you decide to move, neurons in this region fire signals that travel down the spinal cord and into the nerves that control muscles. Each part of the body has a corresponding area on the motor cortex, and areas that require fine control, like the fingers and lips, take up more space than those that handle larger, less precise movements. But the motor cortex does not act alone. Before movement begins, other brain regions are already involved. The premotor cortex helps plan the movement, preparing the correct sequence of actions. The basal ganglia, a group of structures deep in the brain, evaluate the plan and help initiate it. They play a central role in starting, stopping, and regulating motion. In disorders like Parkinson's disease, where the basal ganglia are impaired, movement becomes slow, rigid, or difficult to initiate. Once a movement is underway, the cerebellum steps in to fine-tune it. The cerebellum receives a continuous stream of information about the position of your body, the tension in your muscles, and the speed of your movements. If something is off, a step misjudged, a hand trembling, it sends corrective signals to smooth and adjust the action. This allows for balance, coordination, and timing. The cerebellum is why you can catch a falling object or learn to ride a bike with increasing grace. The brain also relies heavily on sensory feedback. Vision tells you where your hand is in space. Touch tells you how firmly you're gripping an object. Proprioceptors in your muscles and joints send constant updates about the position and angle of your limbs. This feedback forms a closed-loop system, action followed by correction, over and over, in milliseconds. Even automatic tasks like walking or blinking are subject to this feedback, allowing you to adjust to new terrain or sudden changes. Not all movements are conscious. Reflexes are rapid responses that bypass the brain entirely, handled by the spinal cord for speed. When you touch something hot and jerk your hand away, that motion happens before your brain is even aware of the danger. These reflex arcs serve as a protective shortcut, acting faster than conscious thought. The complexity of movement becomes clear when it fails. Injuries to the brain, spinal cord, or peripheral nerves can disrupt even the simplest tasks. A stroke affecting the motor cortex may leave part of the body paralyzed. Damage to the cerebellum can cause tremors or loss of coordination. These impairments reveal how much invisible effort goes into every controlled motion and how interdependent the systems of movement truly are. Yet the brain remains remarkably adaptable. Physical therapy and repetition can help recover lost skills by rerouting signals and retraining neural pathways. Muscle memory, built through practice and consistency, allows athletes, musicians, and craftspeople to perform complex sequences with fluid ease. These movements may seem automatic, but they are the result of long-term neural refinement. Even imagined movement can activate motor planning areas in the brain. Athletes visualize routines before performing them. Musicians mentally rehearse passages before touching an instrument. This mental simulation primes the motor system, strengthening connections through thought alone. The line between planning and execution is thin, and the brain blurs it skillfully. Movement is not just mechanical. It expresses intention, emotion, rhythm, and communication. From the precise gestures of sign language to the subtle shifts of body posture, movement carries meaning beyond motion. The brain does not merely control the body, it shapes presence, action, and response in the world around you. Memory gives continuity to life. It allows you to recall a name, navigate your neighborhood, hold a conversation, or reflect on the past. Without it, each moment would stand alone, unconnected, unfamiliar, and quickly lost. Memory is not a single process, but a collection of systems, each serving a specific function, operating across multiple regions of the brain. Short-term memory is the mind's temporary notepad. It holds small amounts of information for just a few seconds, such as a phone number, a sentence being spoken, or a fleeting observation. This memory system is limited in both duration and capacity. You can typically hold about 7 pieces of information at once, give or take a couple. Unless it is rehearsed or repeated, short-term memory fades quickly, making room for the next task. Closely related is working memory, which goes beyond simple storage. Working memory allows you to manipulate information actively, doing math in your head, following complex instructions, or connecting ideas during reading. It is a mental workspace that supports reasoning, decision-making, and comprehension. The prefrontal cortex plays a central role here, coordinating incoming information and managing how it's used. Long-term memory, by contrast, stores information over extended periods, from minutes to decades. It is vast, flexible, and deeply integrated with identity. Long-term memory is often divided into 2 main types. Explicit memory involves conscious recall, such as remembering facts, events, or vocabulary. This form relies heavily on the hippocampus, especially during the formation of new memories. Damage to this region can prevent the formation of new long-term memories, a condition known as anterograde amnesia. Implicit memory works beneath awareness. It includes skills like riding a bicycle, typing without looking, or reacting to a familiar song. These memories are often stored in structures like the basal ganglia and cerebellum, and they tend to be more durable over time. Once learned, they require little conscious effort to access. You don't think about how to balance when walking, you simply walk. Emotion plays a powerful role in memory formation. The amygdala, which processes emotional significance, interacts with the hippocampus to prioritize memories that carry emotional weight. That is why people often remember where they were during dramatic events or how they felt during pivotal moments. Emotional memories tend to be vivid and long-lasting, although they are not necessarily more accurate. The brain doesn't record experience like a video. Instead, it reconstructs memories each time they are recalled, shaped by current mood, context, and suggestion. Repetition and meaning both enhance memory, Repeating information strengthens the neural connections that support it, while connecting new ideas to existing knowledge makes them easier to retain. This is why learning through stories, analogies, or real-world application often leads to deeper recall than simple memorization. Retrieving a memory is not always instant. The brain stores information across multiple networks. A smell may trigger a memory stored years ago, even when conscious effort failed. This cue-based system allows the brain to access stored knowledge when it is most relevant. However, memories can also become distorted. Each act of remembering is also an act of rewriting. Small changes may enter unnoticed, blending fact and reconstruction. As we age, certain types of memory, especially those related to speed and working memory, may decline slightly. But other forms, such as vocabulary, procedural memory, and emotional understanding, often remain stable or even improve. The brain compensates by using experience and pattern recognition to support effective recall. Memory is not just about the past. It is the foundation of learning, the engine of imagination, and the basis for planning. When you anticipate the future, your brain draws on memories to simulate possibilities. Memory connects moments across time, allowing you to build a life that is coherent, responsive, and deeply personal. Emotions can arise suddenly, sometimes without clear reason. A flash of fear in a dark hallway, the warmth of joy in a familiar voice, the ache of longing when remembering a distant moment. These feelings seem to come from the heart, but they begin in the brain. Emotions are not abstract. They are the product of deeply rooted systems that interpret experience, assign value, and prepare the body to respond. At the core of emotional processing lies a set of interconnected brain structures known as the limbic system. This system plays a central role in regulating emotion, motivation, memory, and behavior. Among its key components are the amygdala, hippocampus, hypothalamus, and parts of the prefrontal cortex. Together, they form a bridge between the primitive instincts of survival and the more refined processes of thought and decision-making. The amygdala is often described as the brain's alarm system. It detects emotionally significant stimuli, especially those related to fear and threat. If a face appears angry or a situation feels dangerous, the amygdala activates rapidly, even before conscious awareness sets in. This allows the body to respond quickly, sometimes with increased heart rate, heightened attention, or an impulse to act. But the amygdala does not only process fear, it also plays a role in detecting excitement, novelty, and emotional salience in general. Close to the amygdala lies the hippocampus, which is central to forming and retrieving memories. The hippocampus provides emotional experiences with context, where they occurred, who was involved, what happened before or after. This link between memory and emotion explains why strong feelings often come attached to vivid recollections, and why emotional memories tend to last longer than neutral ones. The hypothalamus, nestled below these structures, serves as a command center for the body's internal state. It helps regulate hunger, thirst, temperature, and hormonal responses. During emotional arousal, it communicates with the autonomic nervous system to produce physical responses like sweating, trembling, or increased heart rate. The hypothalamus ensures that emotional experiences are felt not just mentally, but throughout the body. Above these regions, the prefrontal cortex helps modulate and interpret emotion. It plays a key role in emotional regulation, empathy, and social behavior. When you calm yourself after an outburst, reconsider a reaction, or understand another person's emotional state, the prefrontal cortex is involved. This area is also responsible for evaluating the appropriateness of emotional responses and adjusting behavior based on long-term goals rather than immediate feelings. Emotion is more than a reaction to external events. It also reflects internal conditions, thoughts, memories, expectations, and physiological states. Feelings such as guilt, pride, embarrassment, or awe emerge from the brain's ability to integrate self-awareness with social understanding and long-term thinking. These emotions are uniquely human and rely on complex coordination between limbic and cortical regions. The relationship between emotion and reason is not a battle. They are not enemies pulling in opposite directions. Instead, they are partners, each informing the other. Emotion can guide attention, highlight what matters, and provide motivation. Reason can offer context, shape goals, and help interpret emotional cues. When the system is balanced, decisions are both thoughtful and meaningful. Disruptions in the limbic system can affect emotional life profoundly. An overactive amygdala may lead to heightened anxiety or fearfulness. Damage to the prefrontal cortex may reduce impulse control or emotional insight. These examples remind us that emotions, while invisible, are rooted in biology and can be affected by injury, stress, or disease. Emotion shapes how we remember, learn, connect, and act. It gives color and weight to experience. Without it, life would be flattened, full of events but devoid of meaning. The limbic system ensures that we do not merely think, but feel our way through the world. Human beings are social by nature. We form families, build communities, tell stories, and seek connection across distances and generations. This tendency is not a cultural accident. It is embedded in the very structure of the brain. Our ability to sense the feelings of others, respond to them, and build relationships is supported by specialized networks that evolved for social survival. At the center of this social capacity is empathy, the ability to feel or understand what another person is experiencing. Empathy arises from both emotional and cognitive processes. Emotional empathy allows us to resonate with someone's joy or pain, while cognitive empathy helps us understand another's perspective, even when their feelings differ from our own. Together, they form the basis for compassion, cooperation, and moral reasoning. One of the brain's tools for empathy is a class of cells known as mirror neurons. First discovered in primates, these neurons fire both when an individual performs an action and when they observe someone else doing the same. Watching a person grasp a cup activates similar motor regions in your brain as if you were reaching for it yourself. This neural mirroring may also extend to emotional states. When someone frowns in sadness or smiles in joy, your brain subtly simulates their experience, laying the foundation for emotional resonance. Social understanding also relies on a network of regions that support what researchers call theory of mind, the ability to attribute beliefs, desires, and feelings to others. The medial prefrontal cortex, temporoparietal junction, and posterior cingulate cortex are all involved in this function. They help you imagine what someone else might be thinking, recognize when their mental state differs from your own, and navigate the invisible rules of social life. Without this capacity, conversation, cooperation, and even humor would lose their meaning. Another key player in social bonding is oxytocin, a hormone and neurotransmitter often associated with trust, bonding, and emotional closeness. Oxytocin levels rise during physical touch, eye contact, and shared positive experiences. It helps strengthen attachments between parents and infants, between romantic partners, and within close-knit groups. While often called the love hormone, its effects are more complex. Oxytocin can enhance connection within groups, while also sharpening boundaries between us and them, reflecting its role in evolutionary group survival. The brain's reward system is deeply intertwined with social interaction. Positive feedback from others, smiles, praise, gestures of support, activates the same dopamine pathways involved in physical reward. Social approval and connection feel good because the brain is wired to value them. This is one reason social rejection or isolation can feel painful. Areas of the brain associated with physical pain, such as the anterior cingulate cortex, are also activated during experiences of exclusion or loneliness. Throughout life, social interaction continues to shape the brain. From early attachment to lifelong friendships, relationships influence emotional regulation, cognitive development, and even physical health. People with strong social ties tend to live longer, recover faster from illness, and show slower cognitive decline in aging. The social brain is not a luxury, it is a necessity for resilience and well-being. Social understanding is also flexible. It can be strengthened through experience, education, and reflection. Empathy can be practiced and expanded. Misunderstandings can be repaired through communication and perspective taking. The brain's social circuits are not fixed. They respond to culture, context, and conscious effort. To be human is to connect. The same brain that processes sensory input and calculates movement also reaches out, reads faces, recognizes pain, and seeks closeness. It interprets tone, remembers kindness, and anticipates needs. These are not extras, they are central functions, critical for survival and flourishing in a world of others. Learning is not limited to classrooms or textbooks. It is a continuous process the brain engages in from the first breath to the last. Whether it's mastering a new language, adapting to a changed environment, or remembering the route to a new location, learning reflects the brain's remarkable ability to change in response to experience. This capacity for change is known as neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections. At its core, neuroplasticity means that the brain is not static. Neurons can strengthen or weaken their connections based on how often they are used. This is often summarized by the phrase, cells that fire together, wire together. When two neurons are repeatedly activated at the same time, the connection between them becomes more efficient. This process, called long-term potentiation, is fundamental to learning and memory. Learning involves multiple systems. When you encounter new information, sensory areas of the brain process it. The hippocampus helps encode it, and regions in the prefrontal cortex may organize it according to relevance or context. Repetition and emotional significance can help transfer this information from short-term memory into long-term storage. The more associations a piece of information has, visual, auditory, emotional, or contextual, the more easily it can be recalled later. The brain does not merely store knowledge passively. It evaluates, categorizes, and reshapes it. As new learning occurs, existing neural networks are updated. Sometimes new connections are added, other times unused ones are pruned away. This process is most active during childhood, when the brain is rapidly shaping itself in response to the environment. But plasticity does not end in adolescence. Adults continue to learn and adapt throughout life, especially in areas like language, motor skills, and emotional regulation. Neuroplasticity is also evident in recovery. After brain injury, undamaged areas can take over lost functions through training and therapy. If a stroke affects the ability to speak, for example, other regions of the brain may gradually develop alternative pathways for language. This adaptability forms the basis for many rehabilitation programs, and it demonstrates the brain's resilience in the face of challenge. Not all learning is deliberate. The brain constantly updates its models of the world based on feedback and prediction error. If you expect one outcome and receive another, the brain adjusts its internal model accordingly. This process is central to how habits are formed, how skills are improved, and how behavior is shaped over time. Learning is also influenced by mindset and motivation. Believing that abilities can improve through effort, what psychologists call a growth mindset, can enhance persistence and performance. When people expect to learn and grow, they engage more deeply and recover more quickly from setbacks. The brain reflects this pattern, with increased plasticity in regions associated with reward and motivation. Sleep plays a critical role in learning. During rest, the brain consolidates memories, strengthens connections, and clears metabolic waste. Studies have shown that sleep deprivation impairs memory formation, while adequate sleep enhances the integration of newly acquired knowledge. This reinforces the idea that learning is not limited to active effort. It continues quietly, even in stillness. Environments rich in novelty, challenge, and feedback support neuroplasticity. Learning a musical instrument, exploring a new culture, or taking on a new professional skill all stimulate brain growth. Physical exercise, too, promotes neural health by increasing blood flow, reducing stress, and encouraging the growth of new neurons, particularly in the hippocampus. To learn is to grow. The brain, through neuroplasticity, is continually reshaped by what it encounters, what it practices, and what it chooses to remember. This capacity allows us not only to acquire new knowledge, but to become new versions of ourselves, more skilled, more aware, and more capable of meeting a changing world. Each day, the brain works tirelessly, processing information, regulating bodily systems, solving problems, and responding to the world. But this constant activity produces metabolic waste, electrical fatigue, and a gradual buildup of stress within neural networks. To sustain its health and clarity, the brain needs a period of systematic recovery. That recovery comes through sleep. Sleep is not passive. It is an active and highly organized process composed of several stages, each with its own purpose. These stages cycle through the night in roughly 90-minute intervals, alternating between non-REM, rapid eye movement, and REM phases. Non-REM sleep includes deep, slow-wave stages that support physical and neural repair, while REM sleep promotes emotional integration and memory processing. Together, they allow the brain to recalibrate and strengthen itself. One of the brain's most remarkable maintenance systems is the glymphatic system, a network that becomes active primarily during sleep. This system clears waste from the brain's interstitial spaces using cerebrospinal fluid, flushing out substances like beta amyloid, which are linked to cognitive decline and neurodegenerative diseases. During deep sleep, brain cells actually shrink slightly, creating more space for this fluid to circulate. It is as if the brain opens its internal plumbing each night to wash itself clean. Sleep also stabilizes electrical activity. Neurons that fire constantly during waking hours enter synchronized rest cycles during sleep. These rhythmic patterns help prevent overstimulation and allow synaptic connections to reset. Without this balance, the brain becomes less efficient at processing incoming signals, leading to poor focus, emotional instability, and cognitive fog. Inadequate sleep disrupts these repair processes. Chronic sleep deprivation has been linked to memory problems, mood disorders, weakened immune function, and increased risk of stroke and dementia. Even short-term sleep loss can impair attention, reduce problem-solving ability, and hinder the brain's ability to adapt. The effects are not only mental but physical, as the brain plays a central role in regulating appetite, stress hormones, and inflammation. Sleep is also crucial for emotional regulation. During REM sleep, the brain replays emotionally charged experiences in a safe, low adrenaline environment. This allows intense feelings to be softened and integrated. People who get sufficient REM sleep often feel more emotionally stable and resilient, while those who are deprived may become more reactive or anxious. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for planning and judgment, is especially sensitive to sleep loss. It is one of the first regions to show reduced activity when rest is limited. This can lead to impulsive decisions, poor self-control, and difficulty interpreting social cues. Over time, the cumulative effect of sleep restriction can shift emotional tone and alter personality traits in subtle but meaningful ways. Interestingly, sleep habits are shaped by both biology and behavior. The body's circadian rhythm, regulated by the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the hypothalamus, sets the internal clock that governs when we feel alert or drowsy. This clock is sensitive to light, temperature, and social cues. Exposure to bright screens late at night, irregular schedules, or stress can all interfere with this natural rhythm, making it harder for the brain to enter restorative sleep cycles. As people age, sleep architecture changes. Deep, slow-wave sleep may decrease, and nighttime awakenings may increase. Still, sleep remains essential across the lifespan. Strategies such as maintaining a consistent schedule, reducing caffeine late in the day, and allowing time to wind down before bed can help support healthier sleep. More than rest, sleep is maintenance, renewal, and integration. It is the quiet phase in which the brain resets itself, not just to recover, but to prepare for tomorrow's complexity. As you sleep, your brain sorts, cleans, and calibrates, protecting what matters, discarding what does not, and refreshing the mind for another day. In the next part of our journey, we'll explore how the brain handles pain, its sources, perceptions, and surprising pathways of relief. Pain is often seen as a signal from the body, a message that something is wrong. But pain is not a direct mirror of injury. It is a complex experience shaped by biology, memory, emotion, and context. The brain does not simply register pain. It interprets, amplifies, or dampens it based on many internal and external factors. Pain begins when nociceptors, specialized sensory receptors in the skin, muscles, and internal organs, detect potentially harmful stimuli, such as pressure, heat, or chemical irritation. These receptors send electrical signals through peripheral nerves to the spinal cord. There, the signals are relayed upward to the brain for interpretation. But the message is not pain yet. Pain arises only when the brain gives meaning to those incoming signals. The thalamus acts as a relay station, directing these sensory inputs to areas like the somatosensory cortex, which maps the location and intensity of the sensation, the insula, which contributes to the emotional quality of pain, and the anterior cingulate cortex, which helps determine how distressing the pain feels. These regions work together to create the full experience of pain, physical, emotional, and cognitive. But this experience is highly variable. Two people with the same injury may feel different levels of pain. One might describe sharp, unbearable agony. Another might report mild discomfort. The difference often lies in the brain's interpretation. Attention, expectation, and past experience all shape the brain's response. If a person believes pain is dangerous and unpredictable, the brain may heighten the sensation. If the pain is expected, controlled, or associated with a meaningful outcome, as in athletic training, it may be less intense or even ignored. The brain can also modulate pain through descending pathways. These neural circuits originate in areas such as the periaqueductal gray in the midbrain and travel downward to the spinal cord, where they inhibit or amplify pain signals before they reach conscious awareness. Neurotransmitters like endorphins and enkephalins, natural opioids produced by the body, can reduce the intensity of pain by blocking these signals. This internal pharmacy helps explain why people in extreme situations sometimes feel no pain at all until after the danger has passed. Chronic pain introduces a new layer of complexity. When pain persists beyond the normal period of healing, it can become a condition in itself. the brain's pain circuits may become sensitized, responding more intensely to even mild stimuli. In some cases, the brain may continue to produce pain even in the absence of clear physical damage. This is seen in conditions like fibromyalgia or neuropathic pain, where nerve pathways misfire and the brain learns to expect discomfort. Psychological factors such as anxiety, depression, and trauma can amplify chronic pain. The connection between emotional and physical suffering is not metaphorical, it is anatomical. Brain regions involved in mood also process pain, and when these systems are imbalanced, the two can reinforce each other. This overlap has led to more integrated approaches to treatment, combining physical therapies with cognitive behavioral strategies, mindfulness, and stress reduction. Pain is also shaped by cultural and social context. Some cultures encourage stoicism, while others validate open expression of discomfort. Social support can lessen the experience of pain, while isolation can deepen it. Placebo effects. When a person experiences real relief after receiving a non-active treatment, demonstrate the brain's ability to shape pain purely through belief and expectation. The opposite is also true. Negative expectations can increase pain, a phenomenon known as the nocebo effect. Understanding pain as a product of the brain does not mean it is imagined or unreal. On the contrary, it affirms that pain is a genuine and deeply personal experience, shaped by the full complexity of the nervous system. It also opens new paths to healing, not only by treating the body, but by working with the brain's natural capacity to modulate perception. Pain is not just a warning, it is a conversation between the body and the brain, a message that, when understood, can guide recovery, adaptation, and deeper awareness of our physical and emotional lives. Language is one of the most powerful tools the human brain has developed. With it, thoughts take shape, emotions gain form, and entire worlds can be built from words alone. Whether spoken, written, signed, or silently thought, language is more than communication. It is structure for memory, a vehicle for abstract reasoning, and a thread that binds human beings across time and place. The brain's capacity for language emerges from the coordination of several specialized regions. In most people, these areas are concentrated in the left hemisphere, particularly in two regions known as Broca's area and Wernicke's area. Broca's area, located in the frontal lobe, helps organize the production of speech, grammar, syntax, and articulation. Wernicke's area, found in the temporal lobe, supports the understanding of language, how words are heard, interpreted, and made meaningful. These two regions are connected by a bundle of nerve fibers called the arcuate fasciculus, which allows comprehension and expression to work in harmony. If you hear a question and reply, this pathway coordinates the transition from understanding to response. When this system is disrupted, through stroke or injury, it can lead to aphasia, a condition where the ability to produce or understand language is impaired, even though intelligence remains intact. The process of speaking begins before the first word is uttered. The brain must select vocabulary, apply grammar rules, shape sound patterns, and coordinate the muscles of the mouth, tongue, and larynx. This happens rapidly and, for fluent speakers, with little conscious effort. Yet behind each sentence lies a dense choreography of neural signals. Language is also deeply tied to memory. The temporal lobes store vocabulary and learned word patterns. The hippocampus helps encode new linguistic information, especially in early learning or when acquiring a second language. As fluency increases, language processing becomes more efficient, drawing on both learned rules and stored experience. Understanding language involves more than recognizing words. It also means interpreting tone, rhythm, context, and intention. The right hemisphere of the brain contributes to this by processing prosody, the musical qualities of speech, and by interpreting metaphor, humor, and emotional cues. This ensures that language is not just accurate, but expressive, and human. Language development begins early in life. Infants are born with the capacity to distinguish the sounds of every language on Earth. By the end of the first year, their brains specialize in the sounds they hear most frequently, shaping their phonetic map. Vocabulary grows rapidly in early childhood, supported by exposure, repetition, and social interaction. The brain's plasticity during this period makes it easier to acquire language, which is why early learning is so effective. Yet language continues to evolve throughout life. Adults learn new words, refine expression, and adapt their language to changing environments and audiences. Bilingual individuals often show greater cognitive flexibility as switching between languages activates attention and executive control systems. This ability can offer protective effects against age-related cognitive decline. Language shapes thought. The structure of a language, its grammar, vocabulary, and metaphors can influence how people categorize objects, perceive time, or assign blame. While the brain can think without words, language allows for more complex reasoning, reflection, and imagination. It enables humans to share ideas across generations, plan for the future, and build societies grounded in shared meaning. The social power of language is immense. With words, people build trust, resolve conflict, teach, deceive, express love, or incite action. The brain is finely attuned to these dynamics, responding to tone, timing, and implication. A single word, well placed, can calm or inflame, invite or reject. This responsiveness reflects the depth at which language is integrated into emotional and cognitive circuits. Language is more than sound. It is an architecture of thought and a bridge between minds. Through it, the brain not only names the world, it reshapes it. Creativity often feels like a spark, an idea arriving from nowhere, a sudden connection between distant thoughts. But within the brain, creativity emerges not from randomness, but from intricate patterns of activity. It is the result of a system constantly weaving together memory, imagination, emotion, and logic to produce something new. At the heart of this process lies a network known as the default mode network, DMN. This system becomes most active when the brain is at rest, when a person is not focused on the external world but instead turns inward. Daydreaming, recalling the past, imagining the future, or drifting through possibilities all involve the DMN. Far from being idle, the brain in this state is busy reorganizing and recombining mental content. The default mode network includes the medial prefrontal cortex, posterior cingulate cortex, precuneus, and angular gyrus, among other regions. These areas communicate across large distances in the brain, allowing information from different domains, visual, emotional, linguistic, spatial, to be integrated in new ways. This crosstalk is essential to original thinking. Creativity requires a balance between the DMN and other networks, especially the executive control network, which includes the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. While the DMN generates ideas, the executive network evaluates them, applies rules, and shapes them into useful forms. Highly creative individuals often show strong connections between these systems, allowing for both spontaneous thought and disciplined refinement. Another important component of creativity is the salience network, which helps determine which ideas are worth pursuing. It shifts attention toward internally or externally relevant stimuli and connects the DMN with the executive network. This triad, generation, evaluation, selection, enables creativity to move from possibility to expression. The creative process is often non-linear. It may involve periods of intense focus, followed by aimless wandering, and then sudden insight. Breakthroughs often occur after stepping away from a problem, during a walk, a shower, or a quiet moment. This reflects the brain's ability to continue working in the background, reorganizing information without conscious effort. Memory plays a vital role. The brain draws from stored experiences, images, patterns, and feelings, combining them in novel ways. Even imagination is grounded in memory, using fragments of the familiar to construct the unfamiliar. The richness of one's internal archive often determines the depth of their creative possibilities. Emotion also influences creativity. Joy, curiosity, melancholy, and even frustration can open different cognitive pathways. Positive emotions often broaden attention and encourage exploration, while more somber moods may lead to deeper reflection and unusual combinations. The brain responds to these emotional states by adjusting its rhythms and connectivity, shaping the flavor of creative output. Creativity is not limited to artists or inventors. It is expressed in problem-solving, humor, storytelling, parenting, and everyday adaptation. The brain's ability to imagine alternatives, anticipate outcomes, and mentally simulate new realities is central to resilience and innovation. Practices such as mindfulness, meditation, and unstructured play have been shown to support creative thinking by allowing the DMN to activate more freely. Likewise, boredom, often seen as undesirable, can provide the mental space necessary for ideas to arise. When the mind is not overloaded, it can roam, connect, and create. Modern imaging studies have revealed that even during rest, the brain is highly active, spending as much as 60 to 80% of its energy on internal tasks unrelated to the external environment. This underscores a profound truth. Doing nothing is not doing nothing. In stillness, the brain reorganizes itself. It is in this space that creativity often begins. To be creative is not to escape the brain's structure, but to embrace it. The mind builds bridges between the seen and unseen, the known and the imagined. These bridges are not made of chance. They are built by a brain always in motion, even in its quietest moments. Music reaches into the brain in ways few other stimuli can. A simple melody can trigger memory, emotion, movement, and even physical sensation. From lullabies to symphonies, music activates a wide network of brain regions, blending rhythm, pattern, and feeling into a unified experience. Its effects are not limited to entertainment. They reflect deep neural processes that link sound to perception, memory, and emotion. The brain processes music through a combination of systems. The auditory cortex, located in the temporal lobe, breaks down sound into pitch, tone, and rhythm. These elements are then analyzed for structure and pattern. Unlike speech, which is often processed in the left hemisphere, music tends to activate both hemispheres, integrating analytic and emotional functions. Rhythm engages motor regions of the brain, including the cerebellum and basal ganglia, which are involved in timing, coordination, and movement. This explains why music often makes people tap their feet, sway, or dance. Even when sitting still, the brain simulates motion in response to rhythm, creating a sense of internal synchronization. Melody and harmony, on the other hand, often engage the prefrontal cortex and limbic system, particularly the amygdala and nucleus accumbens. These areas are involved in emotional response and reward. Pleasurable music can lead to the release of dopamine, the same neurotransmitter associated with food, love, and other forms of reward. This neurochemical response helps explain why music can lift mood, reduce stress, or even bring tears to the eyes. Memory and music are deeply intertwined. Familiar songs can evoke vivid recollections, sometimes more powerfully than images or words. This connection is so strong that music therapy is used to support people with dementia, helping them access long-term memories that language can no longer reach. The hippocampus, central to memory formation, is often active when people listen to or recall music from their past. Music also interacts with the default mode network, particularly during improvisation, daydreaming, or emotional reflection triggered by sound. It can facilitate introspection and shift attention inward. This is why certain types of music enhance creativity, relaxation, or focused concentration. In these moments, the brain aligns internal and external rhythms to create a flow state. The brain's response to music begins early. Infants can distinguish differences in pitch and tempo within months of birth. Exposure to music in childhood enhances language development, pattern recognition, and motor coordination. These effects extend into adulthood, where learning to play an instrument strengthens executive function, memory, and even spatial reasoning. Across cultures, music is used in rituals, healing, storytelling, and community bonding. Its universality suggests that the brain evolved to respond to music not just as sound, but as signal, carrying emotion, structure, and social meaning. The mirror neuron system may contribute to this by simulating the emotional state of the performer, allowing the listener to feel not just the music, but the intent behind it. Musical taste is shaped by familiarity, exposure, and emotional associations. But regardless of genre, the structure of music, its tension, release, repetition, and variation, follows principles that the brain recognizes and responds to. These patterns mirror cognitive processes such as expectation, prediction, error, and resolution, all of which are central to how the brain learns and adapts. Therapeutically, music has been used to manage pain, reduce anxiety, and support recovery after stroke or brain injury. Its ability to engage both cognitive and emotional systems makes it a powerful tool for healing and adaptation. Even in silence, people often carry a soundtrack in their minds, one that shapes mood and memory. Music is more than sound. It is structure, rhythm, emotion, and memory woven into one. The brain listens with its ears, but also with its circuits for movement, emotion, and imagination. To hear music is to activate the whole mind, and sometimes to feel deeply without words. Love feels deeply personal, an experience born of unique connection and emotion. Yet underneath its warmth and mystery lies a precise orchestration of brain activity, hormones, and neural pathways. The sensation of falling in love, sustaining a relationship, or grieving its loss all reflect the brain's role in attachment, reward, and emotional regulation. Romantic love begins with attraction, a process influenced by biology, perception, and past experience. The brain quickly becomes involved through the release of dopamine, a neurotransmitter associated with pleasure and reward. High levels of dopamine in regions like the ventral tegmental area and nucleus accumbens create the euphoria, energy, and focused attention often felt in early-stage infatuation. These same regions are active in addiction, suggesting that love can temporarily resemble a form of natural dependency. Alongside dopamine, oxytocin, and vasopressin play critical roles. Oxytocin, sometimes called the bonding hormone, is released during touch, intimacy, and even eye contact. It enhances trust and connection by calming the amygdala and reinforcing social memory. Vasopressin contributes to pair bonding and territorial behaviors, especially in long-term attachment. These hormones support the transition from passionate attraction to deeper forms of commitment. The hypothalamus, which regulates the autonomic nervous system, becomes involved in the physical responses to love: racing heart, sweaty palms, and flushed skin. At the same time, the prefrontal cortex, responsible for judgment and reasoning, shows reduced activity in early romantic love. This may explain why people sometimes idealize their partners or overlook flaws during the initial stages of connection. Emotional attachment draws on systems that evolved for caregiving and survival. The same networks that bond parents to children are activated in romantic love. This includes the anterior cingulate cortex, involved in emotional awareness, and the insula, which integrates bodily states with emotional experience. Together, they support a sense of union, feeling not only close to someone, but part of a shared identity. Love also changes perception. The brain tends to focus on positive traits, reinforcing emotional investment. It may ignore contradictory evidence or downplay potential risks, leading to what is sometimes called love blindness. This cognitive filtering is not irrational. It's a form of emotional efficiency that prioritizes bonding over objectivity, at least in the beginning. As relationships deepen, new patterns emerge. The brain shifts from novelty-driven circuits to those that support stability, trust, and cooperation. Oxytocin and vasopressin continue to play a role, but other regions become more active, such as the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, which integrates emotional experience with moral judgment and empathy. Long-term love activates areas linked to caregiving and stress buffering, supporting mutual regulation in daily life. Heartbreak and loss also leave a neurological imprint. The absence of a loved one can trigger withdrawal-like symptoms in the brain. Regions associated with physical pain, such as the anterior insular and dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, may become active. Emotional pain is not metaphorical, it is processed through shared circuitry with physical distress. Recovery involves both grieving and the gradual rewiring of expectations and routines. Cultural context shapes how love is expressed and understood, but the brain's core mechanisms remain consistent. Rituals, songs, symbols, and stories about love persist across societies because they reflect shared neural experiences. Whether whispered in private or declared in ceremony, the feeling of being in love arises from a deep biological process of connection and meaning. To love is to engage the whole brain. It is not only a feeling, but a state of focus, motivation, and transformation. The brain learns another person, responds to their presence, adapts to their rhythms, and remembers their absence. In doing so, it reveals its deepest ability to build a bond strong enough to shape identity and soften the edges of solitude. Stress is not simply a feeling, it is a full-body response orchestrated by the brain. When something is perceived as threatening, uncertain, or overwhelming, the brain shifts into high alert, activating systems designed to protect, adapt, and survive. These responses are rooted in ancient circuits that remain deeply influential in modern life. At the center of this process is the amygdala, a small, almond-shaped structure in the brain's temporal lobe. It acts as an early warning system, rapidly evaluating incoming information for signs of danger. When the amygdala detects a threat, real or imagined, it signals other parts of the brain to prepare for action. One of the first regions to respond is the hypothalamus, which activates the autonomic nervous system. This triggers the well-known fight or flight response. The heart rate increases, blood pressure rises, and glucose is released into the bloodstream to fuel muscles. Simultaneously, the hypothalamus initiates a hormonal cascade known as the HPA axis, hypothalamus, pituitary gland, and adrenal glands. Through this axis, the body releases cortisol, a stress hormone that mobilizes energy and heightens alertness. Cortisol also suppresses non-essential functions, such as digestion, reproduction, and immune activity, to prioritize immediate survival. In short bursts, this system is highly adaptive. It allows the body to escape danger, sharpen focus, and respond to urgent challenges. However, when stress becomes chronic, lasting days, weeks, or longer, the same mechanisms that once protected the body begin to wear it down. Prolonged cortisol exposure can impair memory, reduce immune function, and disrupt sleep. The hippocampus, essential for learning and memory, is particularly vulnerable to high cortisol levels. Over time, this can affect cognitive flexibility and emotional regulation. The prefrontal cortex, which supports planning, reasoning, and impulse control, is also affected by stress. Under pressure, its activity may decrease, while the amygdala's influence grows stronger. This imbalance can lead to reactive behavior, emotional outbursts, and difficulty concentrating. People under chronic stress may become more sensitive to perceived threats and less able to reflect calmly. Emotions like fear, anger, and anxiety are not isolated feelings but are part of the brain's broader threat response. They prepare the body for action and communicate urgency to others. The insula, which helps interpret internal bodily states, plays a key role in the subjective experience of stress, those racing thoughts, knots in the stomach, or shallow breaths that signal emotional strain. Not all stress is harmful. Eustress, or positive stress, can enhance motivation, sharpen performance, and support learning. It often occurs when challenges are meaningful and within our capacity to manage. The difference between eustress and distress lies partly in perception. When a person believes they have the resources to cope, the brain responds differently than when a situation feels uncontrollable. Social support can buffer the brain's response to stress. Oxytocin, released through positive social contact, can reduce amygdala activity and lower cortisol levels. Connection with others helps shift the nervous system from defense to regulation, reminding the brain that it is not alone in its burden. Long-term strategies for managing stress often involve restoring balance between the prefrontal cortex and the emotional centers of the brain. Practices such as deep breathing, physical exercise, time in nature, and mindfulness meditation have been shown to reduce amygdala activity and enhance cognitive control. These approaches do not eliminate stress but help the brain recover and recalibrate. Emotion is not weakness, it is information. Data from within. When the brain's alarm system is understood and supported, stress can become less about threat and more about signal, a message that something needs care, change, or attention. The brain cannot avoid stress, but it can learn to navigate it calmly, wisely, and with greater resilience. Sleep is not a passive state. It is a highly active and essential biological process, especially for the brain. Each night, the brain enters a cycle of repair, reorganization, and regulation. Far from switching off, it engages in tasks that keep memory sharp, emotion balanced, and the body's systems aligned. Sleep follows a repeating cycle composed of non-REM, rapid eye movement, and REM stages. Non-REM sleep progresses through 3 distinct phases. The first is light sleep, when brain waves slow and muscles relax. The second deepens the state of rest. And the third, slow wave sleep, is when the brain shows the slowest, largest electrical patterns. These slow waves are linked to cellular repair and the consolidation of declarative memories, such as facts, experiences, and learned skills. During REM sleep, the brain becomes more active. Electrical patterns resemble wakefulness, yet the body is largely paralyzed to prevent acting out dreams. REM is crucial for emotional regulation, creativity, and procedural memory, which involves skills and habits. It is also the stage where most vivid dreaming occurs, fueled by activity in areas such as the amygdala, hippocampus, and visual cortex. One of the brain's most important nightly functions is memory consolidation. Information gathered during the day is reviewed and strengthened, often transferred from the hippocampus to the neocortex for long-term storage. This neural replay helps integrate experiences and supports learning. Without sufficient sleep, memory performance declines, even if the same information was studied or practiced. Sleep also supports emotional processing. The amygdala, which governs the detection of threat and fear, is calmed during deep sleep. This allows the brain to decouple emotion from memory, reducing the sting of painful experiences and making emotional memories more manageable. Lack of sleep disrupts this process, leading to greater emotional reactivity, mood swings, and impaired decision-making. The brain uses sleep to clear metabolic waste. During wakefulness, normal neural activity produces byproducts that accumulate in the brain's extracellular space. During deep sleep, a specialized system called the glymphatic system becomes active. It flushes out waste products, including beta-amyloid and tau, proteins linked to neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's. This nightly cleansing process underscores sleep's role in long-term brain health. Circadian rhythms guide the brain's sleep-wake cycles. These internal clocks, regulated by the suprachiasmatic nucleus of the hypothalamus, respond to light, temperature, and social cues. Disruptions to these rhythms, through shift work, jet lag, or irregular schedules, can interfere with sleep quality, immune function, and mood. Light exposure, especially in the morning, helps anchor these rhythms and support consistent sleep patterns. Sleep needs vary by age and individual. While adults generally require between 7 and 9 hours per night, quality is as important as quantity. Fragmented or shallow sleep fails to provide the same benefits as continuous rest. Even short-term sleep deprivation can reduce attention, impair judgment, and weaken immune defenses. Over time, chronic sleep loss contributes to cardiovascular disease, metabolic disorders, and mental health challenges. The relationship between sleep and the brain is reciprocal. The brain regulates sleep, and sleep restores the brain. When rested, the prefrontal cortex functions more effectively, supporting focus, emotional control, and resilience. Sleep deprivation, in contrast, reduces connectivity in executive areas, while amplifying reactivity in emotional circuits. This imbalance leaves the mind foggy, impulsive, and sensitive to stress. Many factors influence sleep quality: diet, activity, stress, temperature, and habits around bedtime. Yet even with ideal conditions, sleep remains partly mysterious. Why dreams form, why some memories are prioritized, and why sleep is so sensitive to life's disruptions are questions still under study. Sleep is not wasted time, it is essential time, an invisible architecture supporting mental clarity, emotional depth, and physical repair. Each night, the brain withdraws from the world not to rest, but to rebuild, recalibrate, and prepare for another day of thought, feeling, and connection. The human brain is not fixed. From birth to old age, it changes in response to experience, injury, learning, and environment. This capacity for change is called neuroplasticity, a fundamental property of the brain that allows it to adapt, rewire, and reorganize throughout life. Neuroplasticity takes several forms. At the most basic level, it involves the strengthening or weakening of synaptic connections. When certain neural pathways are used frequently, the connections between those neurons grow stronger. When unused, those connections may weaken or disappear. This dynamic process is known as Hebbian learning, often summarized as neurons that fire together, wire together. Plasticity is most visible during early development, when the brain is especially sensitive to experience. Infants form new connections at an extraordinary rate, building the foundations for perception, language, movement, and emotion. During this time, environmental input, such as touch, speech, and social interaction, plays a critical role in shaping the brain's architecture. However, plasticity does not end in childhood. The adult brain remains capable of significant change. Learning a new skill, forming a habit, recovering from injury, or even shifting a mindset engages plastic processes, The motor cortex reorganizes when new movements are practiced. The hippocampus generates new neurons, a process called neurogenesis, especially during learning and in response to physical activity. When the brain is injured, plasticity supports recovery. After a stroke or trauma, undamaged regions can sometimes take over the functions of those that were lost. This reorganization is not automatic. It requires guided rehabilitation and repeated effort, but it reflects the brain's remarkable ability to find new solutions within its own network. Plasticity also underlies habituation and sensitization, basic forms of learning where the brain adjusts its response to repeated stimuli. It supports emotional learning, such as adapting to new social norms, overcoming fears, or developing empathy. These forms of adaptation rely not only on biological changes, but also on conscious reflection and context. Myelination, the process of insulating axons with fatty tissue, enhances the speed and efficiency of neural signals. While much of this occurs in childhood, myelination continues into adulthood and even middle age, supporting the ongoing refinement of cognitive and motor skills. It is part of the reason why certain abilities, like complex reasoning or emotional regulation, continue to mature well into a person's 30s or beyond. Plasticity is also shaped by lifestyle. Regular physical exercise, adequate sleep, cognitive stimulation, and social interaction have all been shown to support brain flexibility. These factors promote the release of growth factors such as BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which supports neuron survival and the growth of new connections. Conversely, chronic stress, inactivity, or isolation can reduce plasticity, making the brain more rigid and less responsive. Over time, this may contribute to cognitive decline or emotional stagnation. Yet even in later life, interventions such as learning a new language, playing an instrument, or engaging in complex problem-solving can trigger structural and functional changes in the brain. One of the most powerful aspects of neuroplasticity is its role in identity and transformation. Through new experiences and choices, the brain reshapes not just abilities, but also perspectives, preferences, and beliefs. This means that personal growth is not only psychological, it is also physical, rooted in the shifting architecture of the neural network. Plasticity is not always beneficial. In some cases, the brain can adapt in ways that reinforce harmful patterns, such as addiction, phobias, or maladaptive coping strategies. These changes are just as real as those that support growth, which is why unlearning can be as important as learning. The same plasticity that builds strength can, without awareness, also entrench struggle. The brain is not static. It is sculpted by what it does, what it feels, and what it repeats. Every challenge, every lesson, and every habit leaves a trace in its circuits. This continuous reshaping allows the mind to meet new realities, repair what was lost, and imagine what has never been. Language is among the most complex and distinctive functions of the human brain. It allows thoughts to become words, and words to become shared understanding. Whether spoken, written, or signed, language links individuals across time and culture through a system of symbols, sound patterns, and structure. The brain's ability to produce and comprehend language depends on a precisely coordinated network of specialized regions. Two of the most well-known areas involved in language processing are Broca's area and Wernicke's area. Broca's area, located in the left inferior frontal gyrus, is primarily responsible for language production, organizing grammar, forming sentences, and coordinating the movements needed for speech. Damage to this region can result in Broca's aphasia, where speech becomes slow and laborious, but comprehension remains relatively intact. Wernicke's area, in the left posterior superior temporal gyrus, is crucial for understanding spoken and written language. Injury to this area leads to Wernicke's aphasia, where speech remains fluent but lacks meaning, and comprehension is significantly impaired. These two regions form the foundation of what is called the perisylvian language network in the left hemisphere, dominant in most right-handed individuals. Yet language processing is not limited to these two zones. It involves a distributed system that includes the angular gyrus, supramarginal gyrus, auditory cortex, and motor cortex. These areas collaborate to decode sound, assign meaning, retrieve vocabulary, and control articulation. White matter tracts such as the arcuate fasciculus connect Broca's and Wernicke's areas, allowing for rapid communication between comprehension and production systems. Language begins forming early. Infants are born with the ability to distinguish between phonemes, the smallest units of sound, from all languages, though this sensitivity narrows by the end of the first year to the sounds of their native language. By age 2, most children begin forming simple sentences. This rapid growth is supported by brain plasticity and the brain's sensitivity to spoken input during critical periods. Bilingualism offers unique insights into the speaking brain. People who grow up fluent in more than one language often show increased gray matter density in the anterior cingulate cortex and enhanced connectivity in regions involved in executive function. This reflects the mental flexibility required to manage multiple linguistic systems. Even in adulthood, learning a new language changes brain structure, strengthening memory, attention, and auditory processing. Language is more than grammar and vocabulary. It is shaped by prosody, the rhythm, tone, and pitch of speech, and by pragmatics, which governs how language is used in context. The right hemisphere plays an important role here, helping interpret emotion, humor, metaphor, and subtext. Understanding sarcasm or a hidden meaning relies on the integration of literal and non-literal content across both hemispheres. The brain also distinguishes between different modalities of language. Sign languages, such as American Sign Language or British Sign Language, activate the same language centers as spoken language. This demonstrates that language is not dependent on sound or speech, but on symbolic structure and communication intent. Even when reading silently, the visual word form area in the left fusiform gyrus activates, translating visual symbols into linguistic meaning. Damage to language networks can arise from stroke, trauma, or neurodegenerative disease, leading to different types of aphasia. Recovery often involves retraining the brain to use alternate pathways or engaging compensatory systems in the opposite hemisphere. Music therapy, gesture, and visual aids can all support communication when speech is impaired, reflecting the brain's flexibility and redundancy in language representation. Language is also tied to thought. While not all thinking depends on words, many cognitive processes, planning, reasoning, memory rehearsal, use inner speech. The default mode network is often active during this internal dialogue. Language shapes perception, frames memory, and provides the mental scaffolding for abstract ideas. It is a tool for others, but also for the self. The speaking brain is an intricate instrument, capable of transforming breath into meaning and symbols into shared imagination. Every conversation is an orchestration of neurons, circuits, and memory, evidence that thought is not silent, but always seeking connection. Every decision, big or small, is the result of a complex interplay between emotion, reason, memory, and prediction. From choosing what to eat for dinner to selecting a life partner, the brain navigates options, evaluates consequences, and selects a course of action, often in fractions of a second. The process may feel intuitive, but beneath the surface, it involves a coordinated network of specialized brain regions working in sequence. At the center of this network is the prefrontal cortex, especially the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which supports reasoning, planning, and impulse control. This area is responsible for weighing evidence, comparing alternatives, and projecting future outcomes. It is often referred to as the brain's executive center, coordinating behavior based on long-term goals rather than immediate gratification. Adjacent to this, the ventromedial prefrontal cortex helps integrate emotional and social information into decision-making. It draws on prior experiences and personal values, allowing choices to feel not only rational but meaningful. When this area is damaged, people may retain logic but lose the ability to make choices aligned with their emotional priorities, a phenomenon observed in certain neurological case studies. Another key player is the anterior cingulate cortex, which detects conflict between competing choices and helps regulate attention. It acts as a kind of internal referee, alerting the brain when something feels uncertain, risky, or contradictory. This internal signaling can trigger a shift in strategy, such as slowing down, re-evaluating options, or seeking more information. Emotion plays a crucial role in decision-making, often serving as a guide rather than a distraction. The amygdala responds to perceived threats or rewards, signaling the brain when something is worth avoiding or pursuing. Far from undermining logic, emotional input often helps the brain assign value to choices: what feels worth doing, what feels wrong, what matters. Reward anticipation involves the nucleus accumbens, which is active when the brain evaluates the potential payoff of an action. This region helps explain why humans are drawn to short-term rewards and why resisting temptation requires effortful control from the prefrontal cortex. The interaction between these two areas, impulse and regulation, is central to habit formation, addiction, and self-control. Memory is another essential component. The hippocampus retrieves relevant experiences from the past to inform present choices. These memories are not always explicit. They often shape preference and judgment beneath conscious awareness. A restaurant once linked to a joyful moment may seem appealing again, even if the details have faded. This is an example of implicit bias, where past experiences silently guide behavior. Some decisions are made quickly, others slowly. The brain uses two main strategies: heuristic processing, which is fast and intuitive, and deliberative processing, which is slower and more analytical. Heuristics work well for routine or time-sensitive decisions, but can lead to errors or bias. Deliberation takes more energy but reduces the risk of oversight. The brain constantly toggles between these modes depending on context and perceived importance. Uncertainty activates unique brain responses. The insula, involved in risk perception and body awareness, becomes active when choices involve ambiguity. This region contributes to the feeling of anxiety before a big decision, or the gut sensation that something is off. These internal cues can guide action, especially when clear logic is unavailable. Even when a decision is made, the process doesn't always end. The post-decisional evaluation, where the brain assesses the outcome and stores the result, helps shape future behavior. When a choice leads to a positive outcome, reinforcement mechanisms increase the likelihood of repeating it. If the outcome is negative, the brain updates its predictions, learning not just from success, but from failure. Decision-making is not just an intellectual exercise. It is a function of the whole brain, shaped by memory, feeling, habit, and context. Each choice leaves a trace, gradually shaping who a person becomes, not only by what they do, but by how they learn to decide. The human brain is remarkably resilient, but it is not invulnerable. When its intricate systems are disrupted, the effects ripple across thought, emotion, behavior, and identity. Neurological and psychiatric disorders reflect the fragility of the brain's balance and the profound consequences when circuits misfire, degenerate, or fail to develop as expected. One of the most studied groups of brain disorders is neurodegenerative diseases, conditions characterized by the progressive loss of neurons. Alzheimer's disease, the most common form of dementia, gradually erodes memory, language, and reasoning. It is marked by the accumulation of abnormal protein clumps, beta-amyloid plaques, and tau tangles, which interfere with communication between neurons and eventually lead to widespread brain atrophy, especially in the hippocampus and cerebral cortex. Parkinson's disease primarily affects movement. It involves the death of dopamine-producing neurons in the substantia nigra, a region of the midbrain. This loss disrupts the smooth coordination of movement, leading to tremors, rigidity, and slowed motion. As the disease progresses, cognitive and emotional changes may also appear. Treatments like levodopa can restore dopamine temporarily, but no current therapy halts the underlying degeneration. Multiple sclerosis is another neurological disorder, though its cause is immune rather than degenerative. In MS, the immune system attacks the myelin sheath, the insulating layer around neurons, disrupting electrical signaling. Symptoms vary widely and can include vision problems, muscle weakness, fatigue, and cognitive difficulties. The unpredictable nature of the disease reflects its diffuse impact across brain and spinal cord pathways. Beyond structural damage, brain disorders can involve imbalances in chemical signaling. In major depressive disorder, for instance, dysregulation of neurotransmitters such as serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine contributes to persistent low mood, fatigue, and altered thought patterns. Depression also affects functional connectivity between the prefrontal cortex, amygdala, and default mode network, reducing emotional regulation and cognitive flexibility. Anxiety disorders involve heightened activation in the amygdala and insula, leading to exaggerated threat perception and bodily arousal. While anxiety can be adaptive in small doses, chronic or generalized anxiety disrupts concentration, sleep, and decision-making. Cognitive behavioral therapy and medications such as SSRIs can help retrain neural circuits, calming the brain's alarm systems. Schizophrenia is a complex disorder characterized by disorganized thinking, hallucinations, and impaired social functioning. It involves alterations in dopaminergic pathways, especially in the mesolimbic system, and structural changes such as reduced gray matter in the prefrontal cortex and hippocampus. The onset typically occurs in early adulthood and may reflect both genetic vulnerability and environmental stressors. Effective management often requires a combination of medication, therapy, and social support. Neurodevelopmental conditions such as autism spectrum disorder, ASD, and attention deficit, hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, emerge early in life and reflect atypical patterns of brain growth and connectivity. In autism, differences are observed in social processing circuits and sensory integration areas, while ADHD involves dysregulation in networks related to attention and executive control. These are not diseases to be cured, but conditions to be understood and supported through tailored strategies. Brain injury is another source of dysfunction. Traumatic brain injury, TBI, can result from a blow to the head, leading to cognitive, emotional, and physical symptoms. Even mild concussions can temporarily alter brain function. Repeated injuries, such as those seen in contact sports, may increase the risk of chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE, a progressive condition with memory loss, impulsivity, and mood disturbances. Understanding brain disorders requires more than identifying what is broken. It involves exploring how the brain tries to adapt, compensate, and recover. In many cases, neuroplasticity offers a path forward. With support, therapy, and ongoing research, the brain can reroute functions, rebuild lost skills, and re-engage with the world in new ways. Disorders of the brain do not erase the person, they reveal the delicate balance behind cognition and emotion and the immense effort required when that balance is disrupted. The brain remains one of the most complex frontiers in science. Despite centuries of observation and decades of technological breakthroughs, much about its inner workings remains unknown. But every year, progress accelerates. New tools, deeper insights, and cross-disciplinary research continue to push the boundaries of understanding. The future of brain science holds the promise not only of treatment, but of transformation, of how we learn, heal, and even define ourselves. One of the most promising developments lies in neurotechnology. Advances in brain-computer interfaces, BCIs, are beginning to translate neural signals into digital commands. These systems can allow paralyzed individuals to move robotic limbs, communicate through thought-controlled typing, or operate external devices with unprecedented precision. While still in early stages, these tools suggest a future where the boundaries between brain and machine may become increasingly fluid. At the same time, non-invasive brain stimulation techniques, such as transcranial magnetic stimulation, TMS, and transcranial direct current stimulation, TDCS, are being refined to modulate brain activity safely. These tools offer therapeutic options for depression, chronic pain, and cognitive enhancement, as well as new methods for studying cause and effect in brain function. Neuroimaging continues to evolve, offering higher resolution and more dynamic views of the living brain. Technologies like functional near-infrared spectroscopy, FNIRS, and magnetoencephalography, MEG, provide insight into how brain regions synchronize in real time. These tools are not just for diagnosing disease, they are helping researchers observe the brain during meditation, decision-making, learning, and sleep. The field of connectomics aims to map the brain's intricate web of connections in unprecedented detail. Using high-powered imaging and artificial intelligence, scientists are constructing neural atlases that trace how billions of neurons interact. Understanding this wiring diagram may help decode how specific thought patterns arise, or how disruptions lead to psychiatric or neurological conditions. In genetics, the exploration of gene expression in the brain is shedding light on individual differences in memory, emotion, and mental health. Personalized medicine, tailored to a person's genetic and neurochemical profile, may offer more precise treatments for conditions like epilepsy, schizophrenia, or Alzheimer's disease. But as knowledge grows, so do questions. Ethical dilemmas emerge. What are the implications of enhancing cognitive abilities beyond natural limits? Who owns data from brain scans? How do we ensure that neurotechnology empowers rather than controls? These concerns are not theoretical, they are already shaping laws, policies, and debates in the growing field of neuroethics. Another horizon lies in regenerative medicine. Early trials with stem cell therapies show potential to replace damaged neurons, while gene editing techniques, like CRISPR, could one day correct genetic mutations responsible for certain brain disorders. While these approaches are still developing, they offer hope for conditions once considered untreatable. Education and learning will also be transformed. Insights from educational neuroscience help tailor teaching methods to align with how the brain processes and retains information. Concepts such as spaced repetition, active recall, and sensory integration are grounded in real observations of neural change. This may allow future generations to learn not only more effectively, but with greater personal insight. Throughout this story, we have explored the brain's many layers, its structures, rhythms, emotions, languages, and choices. And now, as the day comes to a close, the brain returns to one of its most important functions, rest. During sleep, the brain consolidates memories, repairs itself, and recalibrates the systems we've discussed. So if your eyes begin to feel heavy and your mind begins to drift, that is completely fine. Your brain is doing what it is designed to do, processing, integrating, and gently resetting. In the quiet of the night, this incredible organ continues its work. Even in sleep, it is learning, healing, and shaping the future of who you are. We, from Sleepy Stories, wish you a good night.